All right, folks, we're going to get going here in a moment. If everyone can just get settled down, we're going to pick up our meeting. All right. In a moment here, when I get the right note in front of me, where did I put? Oh, there it is. There's so many notes on my desk today. All right. All right. Okay, members of council, members of staff, some of the members of the public that are joining us here tonight. Welcome. It is Thursday, February the 9th, 2023. Council has already met beginning at 3:30. We had a very good presentation in regards to tourism and a tourism plan. Council then went into recess and we had some time here in the chambers, and we are now at 6:30. So we're going to commence and continue with the meeting. As it is 6:30, we're in the middle of the meeting, but I will begin with the land acknowledgement at this time. So I'd like to begin our meeting by recognizing the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples of Canada as traditional stewards and caretakers of the land. And we acknowledge that Clearview Township is located within the boundaries of Treaty 18, the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Tiatanati, the Wendat, and is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples as part of an intricate nationhood that reaches across Turtle Island. At this time of truth and reconciliation, we welcome the opportunity to work together towards a new understandings and new relationships, and ask for guidance in all that we do. And as always, as the mayor of the Township of Clearview, it's my honor and privilege to say the land acknowledgement on behalf of our community. Members of council, as I said, this is a special council meeting. And just to clarify for members of the public who are joining us, we've already begun the meeting. We've already done our approval. We've already done our declaration of pecuniary interest. And so according to my agenda, we're at item 4. Imagine that. Here we are at 6:30. We're already at item 4. This is our public meetings presentation in regards to the municipal budget for 2023. So at this time, I want to acknowledge we have all members of our staff departments are present and or joining us remotely. And the lead for the budget, of course, is the Treasury Department. That is our treasurer, Kelly McDonald. Kelly is with us. She's going to give us, council and members of the public, update presentation. And then after that, we will move right into the public consultation period. So at this time, I will turn it over to Treasurer Kelly McDonald. Good afternoon, Kelly.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to run through today's presentation. This is council's proposed budget being presented to the public. A lot of the sides council will have seen before. If the public has been following along, they may have seen them before as well. This is a kind of a bring it all together and show it to you all at once. Next slide. Next one. So this is the budget timeline that we've been working through. Senior management has been working on the budget since pretty much late fall. Pulling all of the department information together, taking a look at trend analysis, taking a look at prior year budgets and where we came in over and where we came in under, and then looking to what our projections are going to be. This year was not easy. Can you go to the next slide, please, Sarah? And we've seen this slide a couple of times. CPI, we're still sitting at 6.9, and the non-residential building price index is at 15.6, and those two rates affect just about every single thing we do, right from turning on the lights at the arena to getting contracts to do our paving or doing any of our capital projects. Next slide, sir. So here are the main highlights of the 2023 proposed budget. We've got 117 million in capital projects. Almost 92 million of that is actually developer driven. So if the development doesn't begin, we don't do the project. If we do, the developers are either paying for it themselves or it's being funded from development charges. There's 27.9 in general capital and 89.8 in water wastewater. 2.3 million of that 117 million is being funded from taxation. The remainder is, as I say, either grants, reserves, development charges. Our operating budget was which also includes the funding requisitions for the county, the OPP, the MVCA, and the school boards. The total is $31.6 million, with $18.1 million being funded from taxation. This is where the staff proposed budget came in. We came to council on a first draft at 5.91 back in January. These are just a brief outline of what changed. Staff had been getting costing for the sports pad and the ball diamond washroom, so those both came in. Items changed by council direction, primarily from our last February 2nd council meeting. Just giving you an idea of listings there. Next slide, Sarah. Which now puts us at today's budget presentation. We are now coming in with a blended 4.98%. Sorry, Sarah. I think he's doing weird things here. So we basically have a municipal increase of the 7.26 minus the blended rates through the county and the school board. We come out with a net overall increase of 4.98. Next slide. So what that means, for every $100,000 of assessed value, the property taxes will be $56.70 more than they were in 2022. Over an annual increase for the median property, which in Clearview is $315,000, you're looking at $178.61 per year. Next slide. Just to give you a brief outline of what these tax dollars support. There's 250 kilometers of roads, 73 bridges and culverts, 21 kilometers of sidewalks, 3 branches of the library, 5 fire stations, 2 arenas, 2 curling clubs, an outdoor swimming pool, 10 baseball diamonds, 5 soccer pitches, 5 tennis courts, 10 community halls, and of course our OPP. So when we look to our tax dollar, we have to figure out a way to stretch it as far as we can. Quite a few of the neighboring municipalities do not have this volume of service. We hear in the public quite a bit, our tax rates are too high. They're way too high. Why are our tax rates too high compared to our neighbors? So what I've done in this chart is taken the Simcoe County municipalities, and I've looked at their actual tax rates, and I've also compared what some municipalities have done, which is split out a capital rate, and some cases are now splitting out an OPP rate. Those are actually all included in the Clearview tax rate. We don't split it, we don't hide it, it's one rate. So when I combine those rates, this is what we look like. We're at the higher end, but in reality, it's pretty close. Go to the next slide, Sarah. This is a comparison of the growth throughout Simcoe County. So at the beginning of our discussions, we determined how much revenue it's going to take in order to run this municipality. We subtract our growth number because those are dollars we're going to get without having to touch the tax rate. So if the tax rate was at 0 for this year, Clearview would receive an additional $320,000 in revenue. As you can see from this chart, that's fairly low. It is down almost $200,000 from our growth from last year. We hope it keeps going up, but at this point, we're still on the lower side. And again, you've seen this slide before, but just as a refresher, the growth is the one on the top. So where we had vacant land before, we now have a house that's been assessed by MPAC and it's on our roll. Reassessment, which is likely to occur fairly soon, we think, is merely the difference between my house in $216, which is what it is right now, was $315,000 of assessment. When the new assessments come out, maybe that's $400,000 in assessment. That doesn't necessarily change the taxes you're going to pay. It may in fact lower the tax rate depending on the way the assessments go. So what I did was take the residential tax rate and multiply it against the residential assessment for the counties within Simcoe. And this is the chart that we get. So where we hear our tax rate is really, really high, it's not that the tax rate's high. It's that our residential assessments are either lower than our neighboring municipalities, or they have additional commercial, industrial. These properties are charged at a higher tax rate. So if you have a large base of commercial properties, you don't have to charge as much in residential rates. In Clearview, the majority of our tax base is residential. We do not have that type of volume in our commercial and industrial yet. Next slide. And I'm hearing more and more. Everybody loves to see the pie chart. So out of every tax dollar that we collect in Clearview Township, we keep 57 cents. 31 cents goes to our service partners, so the County of Simcoe, the MVCA, the OPP, and 12 cents goes towards the education. The money comes in from a varied sources. We try to bring in as many different sources as we can. However, at the end of the day, property taxes is the main source of revenue. It's the main way we manage to run the municipality. So 61% of those revenues are property taxes. We do have 2% reserve transfers. Other incomes, that'll be our grants and wherever else we can find revenues, 2%. User fees, and that's going to include your water and sewer user rates. That's at 23%. Grants at 3%. And development charges at 9%. And this breaks out by department where each dollar goes. So if we brought in $1 worth of taxes, the library gets 4 cents, planning gets 2 cents, the OPP gets 7 cents, and on and on and on down the list. I'm at the question stage. I'm hoping the public grabbed one of the pamphlets. Clearview's or council's been given one of these as well. This is just basically our draft budget package to start off with. It contains all the information in these slides, plus some details on where changes have happened. And that's pretty much it. I'm here for council questions, and then I will return to my seat and we can let the public ask council questions.
All right, Kelly, thanks very much. Stay right there, please, for a moment anyway. So council, we will have an opportunity to ask some questions directly to Kelly. Before we do that, I just want to go to the CAO, John, just to confirm, although Kelly is our treasurer, each of our departments are represented here and have worked diligently to put their budgets together. Members of council are here as well, who participated in this budget process. So I just want you to affirm for me that we can answer pretty well every question we possibly can get tonight, because we have all of the abilities here to provide the input and information that we need. John, confirm that for me, would you?
I confirm that all of our senior staff are here and they're able to answer questions, as well as I'm sure council's able to answer questions as well. So we have a full complement and we're ready.
Absolutely. Just as one amendment in that the fire chief is on vacation, lucky guy. And so he's not here, but certainly you or the other senior manager should be able to fill in for fire department questions.
So no questions on fire.
No questions on fire. Fair enough. Okay. All right. I'll open the floor then to members of council. Council, you got any questions to Kelly? Go ahead, Paul.
Really, just to confirm our process here for tonight. So we're going to allow the public to give us input now. Then we will, at what point will we be meeting to beat it up again? And then finally to finalize it. Can you just give us the formal process going forward, please?
Absolutely. Through your worship, to the deputy mayor. There's 2 options at this point. We've got a regular scheduled meeting of council on the 27th. And if council feels that that type of a format would be adequate for you to finalize whatever you want to do, the final direction after that would be for the treasurer to create the budget package and the tax rate bylaw. If council wishes to have another entire budget meeting, I'm more than open to do that. And we can schedule that at a date convenient for everybody.
Perfect. I'll just back Kelly up on that, council, it'll be your wish to communicate with me if you feel we need to have an additional special council meeting. It would be, it's my duty to call a special meeting if you require a special meeting. And so through the clerk's office, I've had a preliminary discussion that it would need to be held prior to the 22nd. That would be the only proviso so that it would meet the requirements of getting it into the agenda for the budget or for that meeting, which would be following on the 27th. So just keep that in mind. If you feel that you need to do that, please communicate with me and I'd be prepared to do that. Does that help you, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you.
All right. And again, for procedurally tonight, this is a public consultation. As soon as we open the floor to hear from the public, I just want to make sure that any members of council had any questions or any concerns before we go to the floor and let the public consultation continue. No, we have a card. Mr. Beelan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Kelly, I think there might be one mistake. It's what we had changed the new Lowell roof to. You've got 40,000 here. I thought in the minutes we had put 35,000. Just a small little mistake.
Through your worship to Councillor Beelan. The way I've outlined that is the increased 40,000. So we had originally budgeted 100,000 and then there was discussion of the engineering. The total cost of the project went up to 140. However, we're only funding 35,000 of that from taxation in 2023.
I'm just going to look to Terry to confirm. Is that, you agree with that?
I confirm, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Mr. Beelan, you all comfortable? Okay. If I see nothing further from my members of council, all right, Kelly, you might want to have a seat over here and keep your microphone handy. And at this time, we're going to open the floor to public consultation. We do have members of the public in our room, and I have an opportunity for our technical assistant here to move the camera so that we can get a shot of whoever wants to speak. The microphone is open, and I welcome members of the public to come forward to public consultation in this budget process.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Good evening. How are you?
David, could you just pull that towards you? Thanks.
Hey, now?
We want people to hear you at home.
Oh.
Okay.
I've got quite a few questions. I don't know if I should just ask one at a time or read them all and then.
I tell you what, let's go to 5 at least, and then we'll give somebody else a chance. Is that okay?
Fair enough.
That seems fair. If you've got a whole list.
There was an article in the Creemore Echo probably 2 weeks ago now with certain proposals about the reasoning behind your tax hikes and whatever. And fuel was one of the biggest issues that came up. And so I have some issues with the transit system. I just talked to the deputy mayor and yourself just prior to coming in tonight, but I don't know if I should still bring this up now. Okay.
Yeah, this is public consultation. This is a conversation.
Okay.
Great time for the public to ask questions.
Okay.
We have all of the knowledge base here in the room.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Fares and passes are still at the inaugural prices. I don't quite understand that. Prior to COVID, we were losing $15,000 a month, and that's according to former councillor Tom Patterson, who emailed me that quote. So what are we losing now? 25,000 per month? I don't know.
Is that a question or do you?
That's just a rhetorical type, whatever. Fares should be raised to the surrounding area. It should be $30 for a fare and $80 monthly pass. This $40 per month. People that use it daily are basically only paying 65 cents per ride. Why am I subsidizing the other $1.35 so they can ride the bus? That's one of my big beefs. Same with some of the routing, the routing out through Morgan Road, the 12th concession. You burn up over 10,000 kilometers a year for fuel, wear and tear on the vehicle, labor. How much is the real loss cost for that? It just doesn't make any sense. And some of the stops I have issues with. The one at Huron and Christopher, just outside Huron Meadows, is basically you're standing in water. Like people just come up Huron Street, and if you're making a hard right, you're going to just clip somebody if they happen to be standing at that stop. I don't know why it wouldn't just line up with something within Huron Meadows itself. There's a stop out here on Perry Street. I don't know why it wouldn't be aligned with the one at Lynx. People with mobility issues would probably appreciate and might even use the Lynx bus more if they didn't have to fight to get around the corner. Another one is there's a stop on Scott Street that's basically inaccessible in the wintertime. So I don't understand why standing in live traffic seems to be the only option in the wintertime. That's
You want to
my,
talk about transit then for a little while?
no, that's it. That's transit. I'm done. That's the transit
Okay.
one.
Tell you what, let's see if we get some answers about
Okay.
transit questions.
Okay.
I'll give you one statement off the top, and that in regards to transit. Transit, of course, is offered as a service for persons that are vulnerable or have economic challenges about transit or about getting around and mobility. Transit is certainly an ongoing concern for municipalities all over the country.
Mhm.
Of course, right across regional transit systems, from Go buses to Metrolinx to Air Canada, there's all kinds of transit challenges for keeping costs down, as well as trying to make it cost effective so users and riders can actually afford it. I think you'll find, and you can appreciate, living in this society and this country, that we fund public transit quite heavily with taxation at all levels of government in all areas of our country. And so we're no different. We do take the opportunity to leverage some of the grant funding that comes to us, particularly in gas tax, to help us with capital purchases, such as that bus that we purchased in 2022 was purchased with gas tax funding. So I do know that for sure. If you may, I'd like to go over to Dan, who's our transit, I guess he's responsible for transit. I hate to hang the hat on you, the transit expert, because you got so many other hats you wear, Dan. But Dan, can you address some of the funding and the fuel usage on that bus for Mr. Witzka?
Thank you, Your Worship. I can certainly try. I think we had a discussion at the last council meeting that, certainly my view, just in my starting my fourth year coming up soon, is to reevaluate transit, especially when new developments come on board. New roads are being built, especially in the south and in the east end of the village of Stayner. Reviewing it along with the connection to Lynx Transit, and we have transit that is basically traveling one on top of one another, going to Wasaga Beach. Certainly looking at different routes. We've just recently had a request to review transit to a different part of Wasaga Beach that may or may not be practical or not too. So certainly my idea to have a fulsome review, maybe sometime in 2023, on possible rerouting and revamping, let's say, our standard transit or Clearview transit. One thing that council may remember is that we began a tri-party agreement with Collingwood and Wasaga Beach for accessible transit. A requirement from the province is to have, if you have a transit system, you'd provide accessible transit, and that has taken off quite rapidly. So there'll be a review of that in the fall as well on where we stand with that. When we talk about pricing, those questions would be taken into consideration at the same time of fuel cost. Just to inform the public is that we do have a contract. So we have a contract that based on the service that we have today, it's a fixed rate amount per month, plus maintenance on the vehicle, plus the fuel costs. So rerouting or doing a different route or eliminating that trip to Wasaga Beach potentially, those costs would be reduced as well. So the issue I see with not continuing our route to Wasaga Beach is that Lynx Transit doesn't run on weekends. So eliminating a weekend route from Stayner to Wasaga Beach may be troublesome for some. And I'll leave it there. Hopefully I've answered the question. It is something that I'm looking at for sure.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dan. Just to follow up on that too, Mr. Wiska, the cost of transit and these multiple systems that we have running in our area, you know, Call Trans and Wasaga Beach Transit, Blue Mountain Transit, Links, they are trying to work together. And it's been my great hope as that we'll get all of these people together to create one big entity that runs it. Dan mentioned the accessible transit service that we've cooperated with the other two municipalities. I hope that that's an example of how we can do that and do it well, to provide services that are on a regional basis that serve the whole region and serve everyone equally. And that's my great hope. It's outside of the individual budget of 2023 to try to do that, but the commitment from the staff is that they want to review it. So I think that's a pretty good commitment. And I would look forward to council receiving some recommendations from the people like Mr. Perot, who are considered experts in this. So there you go. I just want to go to the counselor. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just your worship, in those figures that the member of the public gave us of the 15,000 loss, was that before or after the route to Creamore was
Good question.
just continued?
Yeah, actually, Dan and or Kelly, what's your thought on the quote from former Councillor Patterson in regards to what Mr. Wiska suggested per month? Dan? Yeah. Dave, what do you got to say?
I only specifically asked Tom about the Stainer route. I didn't ask about the Creamore route. At all,
Okay.
just to clarify that.
Does that number jive with our calculations, Kelly and or Dan? Or do you want to give you a minute to warm up the calculator?
Your worship, I'd have to go back and look at the numbers. You know,
Okay.
I don't think I follow that close enough to make a comment on what the bus is or isn't making in revenue and operating costs. So happy to do that if council wishes.
All right. Well, it might be good information you can share with us as part of your report in the future. There you go. David, do you have some other questions?
Another question.
Give you a few more minutes here to bring some suggestions forward for council.
Or is everybody done?
Go right ahead for a few more minutes.
Another one on fuel, back to the fuel issues. Why doesn't the Parks Department downsize staff? You could subcontract grass cutting services to people like Curb Appeal, which you already use, and others. They've been doing the town hall, station park, and former feed mill service since Mayor Ferguson's tenure. Perhaps Yard Boy or Springscapes or whoever else would be interested in filling out the routes, doing parks or other public spaces while they're doing other jobs around the township. I assume that Curb Appeal is cheaper, even so they have their own insurance and comp. I just wonder why we need all these new mowers and stuff when things are overlapping. Why does it take Curb Appeal cuts the grass at Station Park on Thursdays, and the township staff, there's two guys sometimes, only cut around the gazebo? Why the overlap? Why not just have one contractor do the whole thing?
That's a good question. And that could have budget implications. So I appreciate you bringing it forward. Perhaps I can go to Terry Vachon. Terry, first of all, let's talk about the capital purchase. A replacement mower is in there in the budget this year. Can you tell us about that? And then maybe we can talk about the staffing to do that. Terry?
Thank you, Your Worship. So regarding the lawnmower, it was actually removed, I think, at the last meeting because it was supposed to be covered by DC charges, but it wasn't part of the DC study, so it actually got removed from the capital.
Okay.
But the intent of that was to replace an existing mower that's had its 10-year life. But and also replacing is not part of DC. So that one was actually removed for this year, and it'll be part of future DC studies that are coming very shortly. Regarding the staffing, we have an existing collective bargaining agreement with our local, and contracting out those services is against the collective bargaining agreement. So we cannot contract out that service at this time.
Okay.
If I understand the question correctly, it was, why aren't we contracting out that service? If that's correct?
So so why is Curb Appeal doing around the town hall for the past 10 years then? They're a private contractor.
Terry?
Sorry, your worship, I can't answer that question. I'm not in charge of that contract. So I don't know who's responsible for that contract.
I assume it's the Parks Department because I do hear the station park and across the street there at the former feed mill. They've been doing it for 10 years.
I would suggest that I think that falls underneath the building maintenance for this building. And so that may go to the CAO or the treasurer to sort of help us answer that question.
Sorry, your worship, just to clarify, it's not the park department, not the Parks Department that's in charge of that. grant.
That's correct. The Parks Department doesn't, do it. But I must say, we do have some amazing volunteers from the Stainer Horticultural Society that look after the gardens and look after the baskets out here every year for us. They do a wonderful job. John or Kelly?
Your worship, Kelly's going to answer probably more of this question than I will, but typically volunteer groups, collective agreements would like to be consulted first before volunteer groups even do work in the community. And they usually allow that to happen. You'll usually consult with your unions as it relates to even hiring summer staff. They would like to know what's going on. So there's an ongoing process. In some cases, they do permit certain work to be done if they can't get to it. But typically, it's not typically a long-term thing.
No. Ms. Treasurer.
Yeah, through your worship. I believe the way Terry was trying to explain it, it was sort of down the right path. It was just not fleshed out. So
Okay.
our recreation department employees are all governed by our contract, our union contract. They are recreation department. So that's going to be anything that falls under that purview. The administration center itself doesn't fall under that purview. That's why we are able to contract out to have the maintenance of this facility taken care of. Unfortunately, Mr. Vachon cannot do that because he would be breaking the union contract and that would be very costly.
That's better.
So how does the feed mill and the station park grass fall under that?
Well, certainly Station Park is a park and that falls underneath Parks and Recreation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, but Curb Appeal's over there cutting grass. So how's that if they're violating the union?
all right, Mr. Vachon, do they cut the grass over there?
Through your
Sorry, I
worship,
don't know that for sure. So
I'm not aware of that.
Every
service being
Thursday.
done.
Before the market in the park.
I'm not aware of
morning,
that
the
service,
state-
your worship.
Thursday morning, the town guy
Okay.
do around the gazebo. Thursday morning, Curb Appeal does up around the museum and up the railway track all the way up to the.
I can't wait for summer to go see this. So, send me a message that it's happening, Mr. Witzka, and I'll go take a look because I didn't know that either.
Boots on the ground gets you the best info.
Thank you very much. All right. Can I ask also that we want to focus on discussions about how budget impacts? So I thought you had a good point there in regards to the lawnmower and why we're buying it. And I failed to remember. I do remember that it got removed. So thank you for bringing that point up about the budget. Mr. Witzka, you want to relinquish the chair for a minute?
Relinquish. Let's.
All right.
Thank you.
Regroup. Hello.
Hello,
I have forgotten your name though.
Amy Freeman.
Oh, nice to see you again.
Nice
That's
to
right.
see you. So I just wrote a bit of a speech that I'd like to say.
Sure.
So I live here in Stainer. I wanted to take a moment to talk about where I have or have not seen our tax dollars going and hope that you can sharpen your pencils to make some hard choices in order to keep the taxes a little bit lower for the people of Clearview Township. I'm an unfortunate resident of Sunnydale Street. So after the long battle of not to pay $34,000 for a sewer pipe that we didn't want to come down the street in the first place, hopefully we'll settle closer to $14,000 per household. But since the project's already started, NPL has sheared off our sump pump drain in minus 25-degree weather. And with a promise from township members to look into it, which no one has ever updated us on, we don't feel very confident in the rest of the work going very smoothly. So I'm wondering, where are our tax dollars and the tax dollars from the 4 generations of my family personally where have they gone to fund this project? We frequently walk in town We have some of the best local vendors and services in this town. However, when we walk down Cherry Street, only half of the sidewalks have been replaced closest to Highway 26. The other half is so rough that I either need to walk on someone's property or on the road. So why are half jobs being done? And if you walk down Superior towards Warrington, there is a massive sinkhole that forces you to walk in the middle of the road. So, and there's no more amount of cold patching that can save that sinkhole. So again, wondering where our tax dollars are going.
Amy, can I just interrupt? I just missed, where was the sinkhole?
Right when you're coming off of Warrington on Superior at the,
Oh, yeah.
where the
Okay.
snowmobile trail runs across.
Sorry, carry on. I missed that when you were talking.
That's fine. So I recently called bylaw for an issue that's stated on Clearview's website as something that bylaw deals with. So when I called bylaw, I was told it was a police issue and to call the police. So I proceeded to call the police, who then promptly laughed at me and said it was a bylaw issue. And that if Clearview would like to direct their taxes to the OPP, then they would deal with this issue. So again, where's our tax dollars going? While other townships were running programs for mom and baby post-COVID, our libraries chose to hand out packages to bring home and do activities at home, which meant my son and I needed to travel to neighboring communities to access programs that we should have been offering here. So I'm wondering again, where our taxes are going. I'm wondering why Grey County is choosing not to take raises in order to not change the rates for taxpayers. And I'm just here to put a face to some of the other families who have the same concerns and are wondering where our tax dollars are going. And we're hoping that you can look deeper into some of these issues.
All right. So I've made a couple of notes. You've got some Sunnydale concerns about the works being deficient. You're talking about rough roads and a sidewalk. You got a sinkhole problem at Warrington and Sunnydale. You're concerned about the library programming and expenses at the library.
Absolutely.
All right. And I missed your last one, just overall statement about where tax dollars go.
Bylaw, wondering
Oh.
why I call bylaw and they
Yeah.
tell me to call the police.
I'm interested in that conversation. Maybe you and I can talk about that, as I also sit on the OPP board along with the CAO
Wonderful.
at this time. I'd like to hear more about that.
That would be great.
Maybe we can talk another time.
Sure.
So let's start if I can. Again, keeping in mind this was a budget discussion.
Yes.
So the works that are going on Sunnydale Street, is that a Mr. Ron discussion? Can you speak to that in regards to deficiencies that are happening there?
Certainly, Your Worship. So in my card, I'm Mike Ron. My card is out there, and grab it, and my cell number's on it. So if there's ever an issue, call me. I think NPL may be a contractor working for the gas company. So Gas and Bell have to move some of their infrastructure on Sunnydale Street before we can actually go in and start doing the storm work. We don't have control over them. Bell and Gas have access over all of our right of way. So they get a permit to enter onto our property, but we don't control their contractors at all. So if somebody has said they'll look at your sump pump, you know.
But if you're I'm just asking questions. So if you're subcontracting them out, wouldn't that make you responsible for them if they're damaging our property?
So it would, however, we're not subcontracting at all. So we have notified Bell and Gas of the work we're doing on Sunnydale Street. Their engineers have determined what has to be moved. They have hired contractors to do that work independently. Okay. And it really, other than it's on the same street and they're doing their work because of our contract, there's no relation. Like they don't talk to us. We don't have dialogue with them. But whoever you pay your gas bill to, you call them and tell them that NPL did work in front of your property and ripped out your sump pump line.
So we posted something on the community Facebook page and we were reached out by a member. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, sorry, Dan, I didn't know about this
Who
one.
we did send an email to and we had no response. So we didn't know any of this, that it was that, because we did do our due diligence and send out the email and never heard anything back.
And before Dan takes over, I want the costing on Sunnydale Street. So the cost per per house is going to be $14,130. That was finalized with a maximum increase of 2%. And that 2% is under $500. So the most you'll pay for the work that we do on our portion of the road will be.
I understand that.
Okay.
I'm wondering where the planning was for this 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, because they knew we had water, we have town water running down, we don't have sewer. So how do we get to this point when there hasn't been budgeting years and years and years before to think, okay, we have water and we're going to need sewer eventually?
Sure. So anytime that an increase in service has come anywhere in Clearview, Creemore, Stainer, we never charged ahead, right? It was a pay for use service. So when the sewers came to Stainer in 1969, they built the plant, they built all the pipes, and everybody had a bill onto their tax bill for 20 years. The town at the time had to decide where to stop putting those sewer lines. So they stopped where they did because it was starting to come out of the ground, right? That's why there's a pump station needed. So they stopped for the cost of the pipe work. Now we have a subdivision in place. There's 4 other developers in the area, and it's in the settlement area. We have an obligation to help service those properties, and that's what triggered the need for this to go in. You know, it would be nice if we could put money away for everything that we might need in 20 years. It's just not doable. And Dan can speak to the other thing. I wasn't aware of the NPL issue, so maybe Dan knows more than I do about it.
Certainly do. And Dan Pro. So we've messaged back and forth. So the next day I got our project manager involved in this project, and they coincidentally had a site meeting with gas and their contractor. That was brought up to them, and it was my understanding that that issue had been repaired. If that's not the case, please let me know, and I will certainly follow up and send that messaging back to you. So I apologize if it hasn't been repaired. For the future, you know, once the road is urbanized, and we're anticipating a start of sometime in April, those sump pump connections will be connected directly to the storm sewers. So
We just don't want a flooded basement in the meantime. That's all. Minus 25.
I'll double check to make sure that was actually done. It was my understanding that was repaired. And I'll send you that messaging.
But they overfilled the ditch and they ran now trench onto my lawn and around the overfilled ditch to get back to the actual culvert. So that's how they fixed it. They found the pipe and they just kind of screen around all my lawn back. So I have to keep an eye on it. I'm just saying, drop down to one. There's no way to contact my own person also.
I'm fine with you contacting me. I have no issue with that. We, you know, even though we're not directly responsible for that contractor, we do have some input and say, so.
I just jump in there. I just want to remind folks, as well as those that are watching, and remember, all these water projects are not funded directly by taxation. So you're asking, you know, we're talking about budgets here and how we budget. So they're funded through obviously the reserves and the funding that we can find through granting or whatever to make these things work, right? As well as DC charges. So municipality, the councilors here make decisions about the taxes and how we could do that. So
Well, I understand that. It's just when I'm not getting any response
Sure.
on any side, like my taxes are still being paid. So I would just like to know. what the
absolutely,
response is
I
on
get it.
some
And
level.
I just want to just keep that in mind. That
No, I fully understand.
I'm really hoping that council is going to hear some recommendations about what we can do with our budget for this season, for this year. So I move on with some of your other points?
Sure.
Over to Dan on rough roads and sidewalk issue you mentioned. Well, I know we're spending some money this budget or this coming budget on sidewalks, right?
Yeah, your worship, I can certainly address the Cherry Street. For some reason unknown, I'll take the responsibility, but that piece of Cherry Street was missed. I don't know if it was a miscommunication with our contractor or not, but I can certainly guarantee that'll be done this year. That piece that was missed. So it was missed. It wasn't on purpose. It was just, I think, a bit of miscommunication. So as part of our sidewalk restoration program for 2023, that'll be done for sure.
There you go.
Superior Street, talk about Superior Street, your worship, is Superior Street is actually part of a urbanization project as well as for through our development charges background study. There is a project coming probably sooner than the urbanization project, but the county of Simcoe is in the works under the of redeveloping their trail system, particularly from Stainer to Angus, the old rail line corridor. And as a part of that works, in partnership with the municipality, the county of Simcoe will be removing those tracks and the actual tracks that cross the road and just getting that area fixed up a little better. So that'll probably, I think, the county of Simcoe are looking to start that project in 2024.
That's right.
I think there's some prep work that they're doing in 2023, but 2024 is when they're going to start the redevelopment, and they are focused on doing the piece in 2024 from Stainer to New Lowell, to New Lowell. So those tracks will be removed. There'll be crossings and things like that associated with that redevelopment.
All right. Does that help you with that answer?
Yeah.
You know, there's going to be a tremendous amount of work. Frankly, this whole trail all the way to Angus is going to be very different. The county's going to spend an awful lot of money there. So that right at the beginning of that trail is what that is. So I did make a note here about the library. You had a question about programming in the library. First of all, thank you for trying to access and use the library service. Could you just outline what it was exactly you were concerned about again?
So I was traveling to neighboring communities to use their library for like mom and tot programs. So like story times and circle times and things like that. And our libraries weren't doing any of that. They were handing out baggies of activities that weren't even age appropriate. So
Yeah. Are you talking about during COVID or just?
it was after COVID, like other libraries are open and doing it. So why aren't we?
It's been many years since I've had a little child, so I don't know. I appreciate what you're bringing up though.
But then there's other, like, I would get to other communities and they're all moms from Stainer. They're all moms from Clearview that are
right
accessing another municipality's library altogether. So I'm
all
just
right.
hoping that we can look
I'll
into
tell you what,
this.
let's refresh our memory by going to the treasurer. I think the library was the first presentation we had when we started this budget council. I think it was. I've kind of forgotten. Is that right, Kelly?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if Jennifer is available to talk about programming. If she's on, I see her name on the screen. I'm not sure if she's available. Let's just check in. If Jennifer LaChapelle's there, go ahead.
I'm here, Your Worship. I can answer this question.
Your Worship, if I may, just before
Yes.
Jennifer gets on, I just want to remind council that in Clearview Township, we followed the recommendations of the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit
Oh,
to the
absolutely.
letter. There were some municipalities that did not. So if that's the case, that was whatever recommendation came from the health unit, we followed it very strictly for the protection of us, protection of our citizens. So that may have been why the Stainer branch was closed in a situation where maybe someone other branch wasn't.
Yeah, to be fair, there was an awful lot of inconsistencies right across the region as to what levels of impact at every municipality. And the treasurer is right. We did follow it very clearly, what the district health unit wants. Jennifer's online. I see her there. She's on the screen. I don't hear her audio though. Turn on your mic there, Jennifer, and say hello.
I've turned it on, Your
I'm not
Worship,
hearing
and
you.
I can
We have
address this
technical support
question.
to make sure Jennifer's voice is coming through.
Can you hear me?
Otherwise, we're all going to be reading lips.
I'm prepared to answer questions about the programming.
Yes, there you are. Okay, we can hear you now. Thank you.
So we initiated in-person programming starting in May of last year and began programming. We had our summer programming, of course, and then in the fall, we started our regular programming. we are right now in the Stainer branch, right next to Early On, who come in, I believe, on Tuesdays to do their programming, and they do a lot of Baby and Me. And there's a concern about duplicating services, especially when we're back to back. We do have Baby and Me programs in our New Lowell branch because Early On does not service that community anymore. And we have had a number of parents come to us and ask about Baby Time and Baby and Me programs that we could deliver. Obviously, they want more than just what Early On can give us. So we are looking at doing that, implementing that shortly.
Okay, Amy, there you go. I hope that helps you. Thank you very much for bringing forward your ideas and suggestions. And if you don't mind, Amy, can you reach out to me? I'd like to have a conversation with you about the bylaw OPP. You know how to get a hold of me? Thank you very much. All right. Members of council, we're moving on with more suggestions from the public in regards to our budget. Bob, it's great to see you.
Good evening, Your
I
Worship.
was counting on you
Council.
being here tonight.
Sorry?
I was counting on you being here tonight.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I do have a few questions that I would like to ask because I'm confused and the only way you can find out is to ask and see what the response is. I'd like to start with the Parks and Rec Department. Mr. Vachon advised when he was making his presentation that he was including in the budget a carryover of $883,000 for the phase 2 of Stainer Downtown Revitalization Project. However, I can't find it in either the Parks and Rec or the Public Works budget. If we are going forward with this project, has it been overlooked from the budget?
I'm glad you brought it up. It's that's an interesting one. I'll start with Terry. Terry can speak about it. Then we'll go to Dan and then to the treasurer and perhaps the CAO. This whole project has been an ongoing delay, it seems, just because it's simply not funded. And so we need to find some funds and grant funding or whatever to help us really do this project. So I'll put it to Terry first. Terry, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. So it hasn't been overlooked, Your Worship, to kind of answer the question. We are still working on that project, but we're only developing conceptual designs at this time to present to council. As you know, phase 1 was completed, which was the north side of 26. So we're still working on the conceptual designs. There has been no funds dedicated to this project yet. It was a number that was presented, I'm going to say at least 3 years ago, before COVID. We thought maybe we would be into phase 2 by now, but obviously COVID had a bit of an impact on that. So we are, again, just working on the conceptual designs, hoping to bring some ideas to council in the early spring.
Okay. Kelly, can you just help council and Mr. Charlton understand when the project was put together, it is a project, but it doesn't have a clear funding model for it. And we were able to find some funds to do phase 1A and then got a small grant from an unusual source. It was through the federal government, but not a general source that we always get from. So Kelly, maybe you can tell us a little bit about how that whole downtown development project would be funded.
Thank you, Worship. It's in the budget. It doesn't have a funding source, so we've classed it as being funded from reserves. The intent for that project is that it does not go ahead until we can find the funding source, preferably grants or potentially some other type of revenue. We do have to have it in the budget as a line item in order to apply for those grants. So that's why you'll see it sort of sitting there as it says it's being funded from reserves, but we know internally and in our notes, the reserve is not being used. It's looking for grant money. I'm hoping that explains.
Does that help?
Oh, my problem is, Your Worship, I can't find it in the budget. I can't find that budget line. Looking at the capital projects for Parks and Rec, I don't see $883,000 in any of the projects listed.
All right, I'll go right to the treasurer. She's scrambling through her books and
Sorry, Your Worship. I believe you are right, Mr. Charlton. It won't be in your printouts. That's going to be in my accounting software. These are prepared through Excel. Unfortunately, when you get to the reports in the back of the packages, you'll see why we have to switch it to Excel. The financial software just does not print nicely. But we do have that set up in the budget as a placeholder so that we can apply for grants.
So Bob, in the end, it doesn't directly affect taxation at this time. So council's trying to keep taxes low. It doesn't affect it right now, but we're using it as a tool to leverage future funding models, funding opportunities, grants, benevolent billionaires, Elon Musk, who knows what, right?
The thing is, if I understand correctly, the process for bringing projects forward, it's to prevent them from affecting taxation at a future year.
Yes.
Was this ever included in taxation in the past? Because if it doesn't appear in the budget this year, if it's not in what we see here as affecting our taxation, then if it comes back on a future budget, is it going to hit taxation again for a second time around?
Okay, so you've struck on something that sits with me. I'm going to look to my counselors, Mr. Walker, perhaps Mr. Broderick. I believe in Kelly, 2019, did we not spend some tax dollars in regards to the mud parking lot through Public Works? That's why the project on B1A was a joint project between the two departments.
I would have to double check the year, your worship, but yes, it was put in as a budget line item in those years, and that's why you're seeing carry forward.
Right.
And the number again is going to be whatever number we had in there at the time. It's not actually anything carried forward yet.
I seem to
But
recall
the original budget, again, I would have to look back in my records to
that's
see
okay.
which.
I seem to recall Dan's predecessor putting money out of taxation to repair some of that former mud parking lot and to get it prepped so that Terry's project could move forward. I think that was taxation, but I might be wrong.
Okay, so it's clear as mud.
No problem.
I'd like to ask another question with regard to a carry forward, and that's the small halls AODA renovations project.
Yep.
Mr. Vachon has advised that there's $1,750,000 in the reserve account at the present time. Just looking through the reserve accounts that list all of the values proposed or that's expected at the end of the year, I can't see where there's a $1,750,000 account. And could you tell me where that is and what account it's located in?
Madam Treasurer.
Through your worship, that is the consolidated hall renovation account. If you're looking at the projected 2023 reserve balances, you'll see that as zero because we were presuming the funding to be used from that reserve to cover off the first two halls. But there is money in there. The numbers have not been updated as, again, that is a carry forward project. We leave the numbers in there that were originally budgeted as our best estimates.
Can I stop you there? Terry, is that correct? That's how you understand it?
Yes, that's correct, your worship.
Okay, good.
So
Well done. See, Bob?
the consolidated halls reserve will be at zero at the end of 2023. Is that what you're saying?
It might be. I don't know until we have the final costing in. So if for some reason there's a delay on the projects that are ongoing right now, then no, it won't be at zero. So that funding that's currently in the reserve, the plan is it will fund the first two halls. We will then have a loan to be taken out in order to replenish that reserve to fund future hall renovations. And the funds that are in the reserve will then pay the loan.
Yeah, I understood that. I just couldn't find out where that money was, but it's a little confusing that the information that we're provided with shows the anticipated position at the end of the year. It might have been helpful to show the current position, the changes, and the anticipated position. That would make it a little bit clearer to figure out.
Mr. Charlton, I look at it very much like the way we are funding the library payback for the debenture on that we are using taxpayers' dollars to pay for it and build a future reserve for the library. So we're paying off that debenture right now with taxpayers' dollars to pay down that library purchase. and we're building a reserve with that funds. And I believe you are a big part of helping to set that up. So it probably, I think it'll be a similar kind of procedure when we get to the point where we have to create a debenture for the reserve replenishment for the halls, because we already make a contribution to that every year now.
I don't want to take any credit for that. That was,
No, I'm giving you the credit because you did it.
I'll give all the credit to Mr. Henley on that one. That's
true, but you led the charge.
He turned the light on.
There you go. Fair enough.
So we are putting $250,000 away, as I understand it, in that reserve fund, and that's included in the $430,000 reserve for rec department this year. Is that where that is?
Kelly's nodding her head. Yeah.
Yes, there is a $250,000 contribution to that reserve on an annual basis.
Thank you. So the budget also indicates an expense of $4 million in 2023, with $1.5 million to come from reserves and the balance to be funded through debenture. In their report to council on February 25th, 2022, RJ Burnside and Associates provided a cost estimate of $5,675,000 as a reasonable cost to complete the proposed work on all 6 halls. The same report provides a combined estimate for Evening and Sunnydale halls at $2,183,000. And those are the 2 halls that would be dealt with this year or next. Neither estimate matches the $4,000 in the 2023 budget. So I wonder if we could explain what's included in the $4 million.
Excellent. Kelly.
Your worship, as I mentioned, with this project being a carry forward, we go with the original estimates and we leave those numbers in there. So that $4 million that you're looking at was the amount that was originally estimated. It's not affecting taxation. So we'd have to almost do a monthly update on what the cost is going to be at the end of the day. For the purposes of doing the budget package itself, we leave the original costing, which was the 4 million minus the reserve, and then the debenture covering anything we don't have in the reserve.
I understand what you're saying, and that's what I would have anticipated seeing there, but the RJ Burnside estimate was $5,675,000, not 4 million.
The original costing estimates that we were given for budgeting purposes, and I'd have to look to Terry to find out how long ago that was $4 million. And that's what we've gone with. If you look back in prior capital years, that's the number that you'll see there as well.
Okay.
Can I turn to Terry? You got any comment on that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Your Worship. So I think it was 2018 or 2019 where the 4 million came out of. When we refreshed the report, as Mr. Charlton is saying with RJ Burnside, those were predicted amounts based on 2023 dollars taking into effect COVID. So those numbers have not been adjusted yet because we're doing 2 halls at a time. And so the reserve obviously covers the first 2, but the original 4 million came from 2018 or 2019. And then we got a refreshed report in February to give us a better idea of what the true cost would be to date, knowing that the cost of material and labor has gone up. The reserve hasn't been adjusted accordingly.
Okay. Bob?
Okay, thank you.
Do you have another one? Because I'm just looking to your gentleman behind you. He may want to jump into. How many do you have?
I will relinquish the floor temporarily and someone else to speak. Thank you.
All right, if that's comfortable for you. Amy, did you have more? No. Mr. Witzka? Yeah. This is called sharing the mic. I like this. Thank you very much for being very cooperative, folks.
Okay, back to fuel issues.
Fuel. Okay.
Yeah. Why isn't there boomerang tracking devices installed on all pickup trucks? One, it's a great incentive for reduction in insurance, seeing as how our rates went up 11% last year. And 2, you can live track the vehicles to make working more efficient. Why are employees sitting in drive-throughs for 5 to 10 minutes, then heading back to the shop or arena for their allotted break? Why are we paying for this entitlement? Is this in the collective agreement? Perhaps it needs to be reopened or enforced.
I'll make a note of that when we go to negotiations. I will say about the boomerang system. I know for sure that our vehicles are GPS tracked, and many of them download their data when they return back to the base. Some of them are actually uploaded on the fly. To be honest, many of the operators aren't even fully aware of how that's working because many of the vehicles are not even owned by us. They're leased by us. So maybe Dan could speak a little bit about the GPS systems and just confidence and security we have in our vehicles.
Thank you, Your Worship. And, certainly our plows and graders and backhoes and all those pieces of equipment are tracked. Mainly for risk mitigation when it comes to claims from winter operations specifically, but all operations throughout the year. Our new fleet program that we entered into 2 years ago, almost now, with Enterprise, the township installed, they're called geotabs, so they're GPS tracking systems. Unfortunately, they're only in a few, and the municipality has come out with a recent policy as far as electronic monitoring, where we have to outline what staff are being tracked on and make sure that they're aware what they're being tracked on, from being a township phone to GPS tracking. We actually have a meeting tomorrow, very coincidental, with Enterprise to fully deploy GPS tracking on all our leased Enterprise vehicles. So that will be coming very shortly. As far as fuel tracking, that information is as part of the fleet, or the Enterprise fleet program. That information is tracked, I believe, monthly. That's how they evaluate the leases and how they will be evaluated year over year on recommendations for lease turnover and fuel economy and price of vehicles. It's all evaluated, and recommendations for releasing those vehicles. So hope that answers your question.
How's that?
Okay.
GPS is your friend. Just don't drive down a winter maintenance road.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Okay. Different one now. Still on fuel issues.
Okay.
Do township employees who moonlight doing water hookups reimburse the township for using township equipment? If not, why? It saves people over $9,700 on water hookups. Shouldn't the taxpayer be reimbursed in some way?
Well, first of all, I would expect council has no knowledge of anybody doing that. If they are, that would be a CAO, HR, and senior manager issue.
Okay.
So before we go any further, if that's an accusation that you're making,
No,
I
it
would
isn't.
encourage you to meet with the CAO.
It's not an accusation. Plenty of witnesses on that one. Okay, different. Bob, you got more to do? Now on to administration issues. Basically, I can't find anything on legal expenses. I just wanted to know how much we're still spending on the current Roxetus claim, on the Clearview Hops defamation lawsuit, and are we still blowing money on the 26, 27 side road issues?
Legal issues are ongoing. All of those files that you mentioned are still ongoing. Resolution in some of those files is pending. And we hope that we can bring that to a conclusion. As far as legal expenses, perhaps I can go to the clerk and the CAO to answer that. Mr. CAO or not the clerk, the treasurer. Do you have any comments about the file for administration and legal? John?
I don't track the expenses on an ongoing basis, but we usually, through our own legislative processes, are required to have legal counsel review many of our agreements and contracts, which we do on a regular basis. They work with us in any other agreements that would lead to development agreements and other matters. A lot of these things are ongoing. I think our finance director can probably give a more clear picture, but it's all required work. Some of the expenses are attached to work associated with DCs and some come out of taxation.
Now, if you look to your contracted services in the packages that were handed out,
Mhm.
that would include legal fees as well.
What page is that on?
It's on multiple pages. Anywhere you see contracted services within the department budget, that's going to include things like legal and consulting fees. Each different department requires certain legal consulting fees that legislative are required or situationally required.
Okay, so just ballpark, how much are we spending this year on these three issues?
I don't have a total for you on that, but I can certainly find one.
Okay, thank you. Bob, you want to go again?
What do you got, Dave? Got another one?
Yep, on to projects and estimates. What's the threshold going forward where projects are stopped from being built? 25%, 200%, 300%? Those numbers I bring up because the 25% is the Brock Street Trail, whatever you want to call it. The 200% over budget is the Gowan Park gazebo fiasco. And 300% over budget is the glorified sidewalk lawn out at the library. I'm just astounded that you can budget low and then think that going over budget by those amounts is acceptable.
Can I give you an example of one that is certainly reached a threshold? I know you've brought it up before when you asked about the Gowan Pavilion and the cost of the Gowan Pavilion. So Councillor Deneen brought forward a very good recommendation and asked council to ask our staff to get a report on replacing or building a similar kind of structure for the Nottawa ballpark. It came in with a shocking value of over $980,000 to build a similar building, of which we built for about $390,000. It's unbelievable, the cost sometimes. And that's where the threshold comes, because it's a political decision to decide to move these type of projects forward. Council makes that decision. And unfortunately for Councillor Deneen's motion, we did not move ahead with building that project. That being said, we're continually surprised, like you are and like everyone is, at how much it costs to do these type of projects when they seem straightforward. In the end, though, you brought up the project up at the library with the landscaping. It turned out quite nice. It turned out quite beautiful. It's going to be very effective, should be very good to be maintained. So it's a bit of an investment in the property and to help it continue to provide the services that the Clearview Township residents are expecting of that type of facility. We weren't going to leave it as a gravel pit as it was left by the contractor. We were going to move ahead and get it done. And that's what we did.
Bob, you want to speak yet? No? Okay, let's move on to Stainer Facilities and Parks capital projects. According to this, you've got $30,000 for rail trails. Will this include fixing the collapsed undercarriage on both Blue Bridges and Centennial Park? It's been an ongoing issue for years that's never been addressed.
You know
I've
what?
sent pictures.
I'd like to hear about it myself. Terry.
Thank you, Your Worship. To answer Mr. Witzka's question, no, those funds were not dedicated to repair the stonework under those bridges. Those bridges were evaluated before my time, I would say about 6 years ago. They were deemed safe at that time. We will be engaging engineers to review the bridge, to do an evaluation, to make sure that it is still safe, or if it isn't, as per Mr. Witzka's comments. But no, the 30,000 is not for the repair of that bridge.
All right. And on that topic of bridges, if we reevaluate the bridge and find it to be in a unsatisfactory or unsafe condition, first of all, what are the actions that you and your department would do? And second, do we have reserve funding to be able to afford to pay for that?
Yes, yeah, thank you, Your Worship. If the bridges are deemed unsafe, I would bring a report to council ASAP for council to make a decision. There may be other funding opportunities on an emergency basis to repair those bridges. It could be perhaps postponed to us if it's not deemed an absolute emergency. It might be postponed to the following year, or the third option would be to close the bridge down so that folks don't have access to it. I think we did something quite similar to the snowmobile trail bridge.
Right.
It was deemed unsafe and it was closed down, I think during COVID. So we would do the same thing if required. It depends on how severe those repairs are, Your Worship.
All right, thank you. There you go, Dave.
The snowmobile bridge is closed down because I complained to the bylaw department. It took 10 years to get that resolved. I went to the building
I
department.
know.
I went to the parks department with photos and whatever. It took 10 years to find an obscure bylaw to get it rectified. So I thank Joe Paddock for resolving that issue after
Thank you.
10 years.
Yeah. By the way, there's a whole lot of people behind that decision and we won't want to get into it right now, but I'd be more than happy to sit with you and talk to you about that.
$250,000 for sidewalks. Will the public be involved in input on where possible sidewalks will be placed?
Generally, there's not really public consultation about that type of project, but we certainly do hear from the public about where their concerns are with sidewalk work. Our staff present a recommendation of funding and models of works that they have determined that need to be replaced. We use the street scan software as well, which provides us a good database for the condition of our sidewalks and streets. And so I leave it in the hands of our staff to bring forward those recommendations, which they then pitch to council. Certainly council speak to members of the public as well and hear from them about what areas are, possibly needing to be repaired. Dan, do you have a comment about how we make this decision about which sidewalks get repaired?
Hey, Your Worship, and you pretty much nailed it right on the head. In 2020, we did street scan, which not only evaluated our roads from a all of our roads on condition indexing. It also did our sidewalks. So they went around our sidewalks, evaluated it based on depressions, cracks, all those types of things. And we are with the $250,000 that were allocated in our budget, we select the worst at the top, and we're working our way down. So that's the process, and we'll continue on that. Sometimes there are special requests that have come through council to look at other areas that perhaps pieces of sidewalk can be installed, and we would approach that way.
All right. So approach a member of council. If you have
Just
a
from a safety
recommendation.
standpoint, people have been asking for years for a sidewalk from Mary Street to Mill Street along George Street. It being the second busiest entry into Creemore, there's no sidewalk for kids to walk on. There's a super mailbox about halfway between Gowan Park and Mill Street. And for years, people have been asking for
Mr.
sidewalk there.
Wiska, I don't disagree with you. I'm very aware of the George Street challenge, and we've been battling back and forth to try to get that solved.
$30,000 for a kitchen hood, stove, and fridge at Stainer Arena. Is that the benchmark for every hall going forward?
I don't believe that's a benchmark. I think
Well,
it's
you're going to probably have to
individual.
put a-
All the halls are going to have work done on them. They're individual halls. They have unique setups in each one, but
they'll all have like a fire suppression system, a commercial dishwasher, fridge, stove, all that going forward, right?
Mr. Vachon?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Yes, that is correct. So all the halls, as they're getting their AODA renovations, part of the decision that council made was to also replace and add proper fire suppression systems, as per Mr. Riska's comments. For the Stainer Arena kitchen, there's already an existing stove there with an existing range, very old, very obsolete, not as per 2023 standards. So the goal with those funds is to replace the existing stove and replace the existing hood with proper suppression system at that location.
Okay.
You want to go yet?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Wiska. Mr. Charlton. If I can just pause the meeting, go ahead. I just want to comment to members of council. I'm prepared to go as long as people want to ask questions because that's what we're here for, to hear from the members of the public. So if anybody has any questions on that, that's how I'm going to continue to proceed. Mr. Charlton?
Thank you. This isn't a question. This time, I just have a comment to make about the budget.
Sure.
During the, this is concerning Public Works. During the third budget workshop, you questioned or you opened a discussion, shall we say, about the bridge reserve account and whether our reserve contribution of $788,000 annually was sufficient to cover the bridge replacement costs going forward. Mr. Perot, during his discussion, indicated that for 2024, he expects the Collingwood Street Bridge construction would be in the budget for that year. He hopes that with the current reserve plus the contributions from 2023 and 2024, less the draws against it, that there would be sufficient funds there to meet the cost of that bridge. However, I also got the impression that it probably will not. He did mention as well that a bridge on concession 2, it sounds like it's going to be in the budget for 2025. I'm not familiar with that bridge, but I'm wondering if that could be one of those $1.5 million bridges. If so, we will be facing a funding crunch a lot sooner than later.
Yes, we will.
Mr. Perot did indicate contributions of $788,000 are not sustainable going forward. So I'm surprised that council did not pick up on that red flag and make some increase in the reserve contributions this year. So I hope if no reserve no increase in reserve is made at this point, that at the very least, council would be prepared to ask staff to prepare a bridge replacement schedule and estimated costs. Then bring the contribution recommendation back to council, showing how the reserve could be put back in a sustainable position. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that. I will go to Mr. Ron and Mr. Perot. I had a brief conversation with them in the doorway of my office just about an hour and a half ago. And we discussed that point about whether or not the 788 every year is going to be enough. Dan, you want to follow up with that? Is there anything more that you want to add to that?
Thank you, Your Worship. And I won't speak to a report that I have on for Monday, but that would tackle the second concession bridge, which Mr. Charlton brought up just recently. But it is I want to say it's a difficult question because out of the 73 bridges we have, there are actually 73 structures. Many of them are structures that are over 3 meters in diameter. So when you say bridge out of the 73, they're not actual bridges, they're just 73 structures. So we may have culverts that are 3 meters in diameter or larger that show up on a replacement schedule. So I'll take for an example the structure that we did last year down on the Pretty River at the Collingwood Clearview town line. That was just a relining. So it's to shore it up and reline that culvert for it to last for further years. That project, I believe, was about $480,000. So that 788 would have covered that. The bridge, the Collingwood Street Bridge, that we are in the midst of designing or having designed for construction next year. That bridge back in 2021, I believe it was, is the last time I think it came to council as far as direction and evaluation. I believe it was about $3.1 million. So, that 788 is not going to cut it. I can certainly, if council wishes, we can have our bridge inspection report evaluated as far as our deficiencies in bridge funding over the next 10, 20, 30 years that is in the report. The 2022 is in draft form right now. The bridge inspection report is in draft form. But as part of finalizing that report, I can certainly notify council through a report if they wish to talk about what the deficits are or potential deficits are of what we could look at and how to fund those projects moving forward.
I said no more questions, but
Sure.
that just makes me think of another question. If, for instance, well, for 2024 or 2024-25 for the Collingwood Street Bridge, if we ended up spending our full reserve and had a deficit on that project, would that have to come out of taxation? Or do we borrow it, or what? How would we deal with something like that? Because that could become more and more an issue as we go forward, and that would increase our taxes as well. So
Bob, as you know, the municipality, because we're a government, have a couple of avenues to borrow monies to leverage discretionary reserves if necessary. There are ways to do that. We obviously are going to be working with Infrastructure Ontario the best we can. The federal and provincial governments talk about infrastructure all the time. AMO talks about infrastructure all the time. They're all crying the blues that we have huge deficits in infrastructure right across the country. And so it's really clear that the governments above us, the upper tiers, need to help the lower tier municipalities carry this. There is some help, but it hasn't been fruitful, if you know what I'm saying. And yes, we do have other tools and opportunities to leverage, to borrow funds or to move funds to make sure that we don't go into a deficit situation on any one project. And of course, overall, when we file our FIR statements to the province, we are a balanced budget and we will maintain that. We have to, it's a requirement. I'm going to go to Kelly. Kelly, how am I doing?
Thank you, Worship. In certain cases, we do have negative balances in our reserves. There is always a financial plan on how that is not going to continue. So it may be the one bridge that we needed to do this year is $588,000, and we've already spent that reserve. We will put the bridge reserve into a negative for 588, which is then internally funded from our other reserves until the money goes back in again. But there's always that financial plan that reserve is not going to stay at zero. This is just a temporary borrowing from other reserves.
Well, that sounds good. I've always bragged about the how well we have done in managing our bridge revitalization program with having a very robust reserve program for them. And I would hate to see us lose that because I think it would become a problem from a taxation point of view. And I would hate to see us get into that jackpot rather than be able to have a nice, robust reserve program going.
Thank you. I'm very aware of what you're saying, and it's been on my mind for a while. I look at the other municipalities around us too, and I look at various reserves that they have and what we do. And since I've been on this council, I've been very impressed at how we build reserves. Every year we manage those reserves and we lean on those reserves when necessary. Unfortunately, I think this year and perhaps even next year might be years where, because of inflation and so on, we're going to have to be drawing upon those reserves. And you're right, the bridge issue is one of them that's going to stand out and cause us all kinds of grief. So thanks for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Appreciate hearing from you.
Appreciate your responses.
Absolutely. Mr. Whitsker, you coming back? All right.
I want to deal with to me anyways, a rather contentious issue. It's from Schedule B to Bylaw 14-65. Paragraph H, a particular vendor is being recommended because it is more cost effective or beneficial to the township. I'd like to know how many of the following non-emergency projects will go directly to what I like to call the untendered family and friends, Section 19.
Well, you can call it that, but that's not what we call it.
Well, a lot of people call it that. For example, resurfacing the ball diamond for $20,000. Is that going to be an open tender, or is that just?
Who would like to speak about our purchasing bylaw? Terry.
Thank you, Your Worship. I can't comment on the purchasing bylaw, but I can definitely comment on the.
That's
on
the
baseball
overall
park.
tool that's used by all of the departments when we purchase something,
Yeah,
right?
but for the baseball park specifically, yes, there will be a request for quotation that will go out for different contractors who provide that service. So for that ballpark.
There you go.
The skateboard park replacement for $100,000. Why wouldn't you try and refurbish the decking with birch or masonite? You could, the SCI shop builds amazing little sheds there. I'm sure they have the qualifications and tools to retop all the existing pieces of equipment out there. I walked out there today. The framing on that seems fine. It's just deterioration over the years, because I think that's been since when was Carruthers was on council. She's the one that got it. So it's been around for a long time. The decking needs to be replaced. The frames are fine. So
Sure.
why not integrate it somehow and get a school program out there to put it together
I
to
just wanna-
save money?
I want to point out, Mr. Witzka, so you've brought up a point that we can talk about as a council, and that is whether we move ahead with the skateboard project or not, or whether we change that funding for new to refurb, right? Which will then create savings. That's your objective?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Okay. The other thing, replace and repair playground equipment. Like, what's the procedure for repairing? Because I'm sure engineering will be involved, and they'll probably just say, no, it's too much liability, so replace it all for probably a lot higher price, correct?
I don't know. Who wants that? Terry?
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Your Worship. So we work with a bunch of contractors that are experts in that field. So they come and do the evaluation of the equipment that we have. They'll replace if required. Sometimes you can refurbish, and in some areas we can actually just replace it, add with new. It's going to be a combination of tasks, not just one. We don't have to hire engineers with that. The experts that sell the product have their own engineering people that do that evaluation for us and provide CSA approved equipment.
All right.
Resurface the Stainer Center Hall flooring for $75,000. From my understanding, it's basically removing the shuffleboard signatures from the floor and whatever in that part of the building. I was like, when the debate was on there, to me personally, that floor looked perfectly fine. So I don't know why you're spending that kind of money to replace the floor.
Another good point for discussion. Terry, you got a comment on the shuffleboard floor?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So the flooring we think is had its last days. It's older floor. Type of material is beyond being cleaned and shined. You know, it looks very faded. The problem is we repainted the entire hall. We've brought all the doors and everything up to code. Everything looks really good, and the floor sticks out and looks, in our opinion, very bad. The goal is to replace that floor, and perhaps use a flooring that's more conducive to more of the programming that we're receiving. When that floor was installed, it was designed mainly for functions such as dances, buck and does, that kind of stuff. And we're seeing now more of a need for the library programs, youth programs, child programs. And so our programs has kind of shifted a little bit. And that floor that we have, that 12-inch by 12-inch parquet flooring, is just something from the 80s and is due to be changed, Your Worship.
Right. Thank you, Dave. Good one.
Okay, from the Creemore Echo, I'm just quoting some numbers here. New Lowell, add a roof to the existing outdoor rink event area with LED lights for $100,000. I'm asking why on that, because Wasaga Beach and Collingwood both have outdoor rinks and they seem to be fine. We even have a rink over here at Ives Park in the wintertime, and it seems to be fine. And then after reading the papers there, it says $140,000 now. So what is the actual price going to be?
Council reestablished that at our last meeting. We had quite a discussion. We clarified that while the intent is to put on a roof, it had not been properly, or we had not considered engineering. So under advice from staff, we moved it to $140,000 for the project, which would include engineering work to, if you're creating a structure that's going over top of people's heads, you want to make sure it's engineered. So that's why that's been added in there. So Madam Treasurer, it is 140 at this time. Is that correct?
You're correct, Worship. So the costing is 140 with 35,000 being funded from taxation.
There you go.
Still not a real,
Pardon me, Dave?
it's still not something that's required. It's just a waste of money, in my opinion, and the opinion of a lot of people that actually live in New Lowell. So that's just my comment on it.
Well, thank
Okay,
you.
onto the Eco Park, $50,000 for a viewing platform. What's that all about?
During the presentations that Terry and Amanda Murray presented, they talk about that project. It has to do with providing access to the water, and it was also an improvement for habitat for some swallows, I believe, was also included in part of that.
Yeah,
Terry?
there's $10,000 for swallow
Right,
habitat.
that's in there as well.
What's that all about? I used to have swallows in my place till the neighbor
Sure.
started spraying his corn with a helicopter. Now I don't have swallows anymore, so I don't know why you're spending $10,000 on swallows over there.
Well, you know, it's about protecting the environment and supporting wildlife. That's what they're doing. Terry, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I'll try my best, Your Worship. So those ideas come from the Eco Park plan that was done. Again, I don't know the exact year. I wasn't here for that point, but these are items that were taken from that plan to be added to the Eco Park to enhance the Eco Park. The feedback that we're getting from the folks that use it regularly, a lot of them have made these recommendations to us that it would enhance the Eco Park as a whole. But again, it's from the original Eco Park plan, Your Worship, that council
Okay.
had approved.
All right. Dave?
Council chambers redesigned for $125,000. That's from the Creamer Echo again. Now, according to this paper behind me, it's $175,000. So which is it and how much higher will it go?
Kelly, what is it? She's going to look it up. I'll just talk about the project briefly, Dave, for your reference and anybody else who might be interested. If you notice the dais here where we're seated is elevated off the main floor structure. And so this dais is not accessible. And yet we have members of our community who are dealing with wheelchairs and mobility issues that, as yourself, as a former candidate in the election, if a person like wished to do that and wished to run and they were successfully elected, they would not be able to sit at the dais. And frankly, that is just not acceptable in our society. And so this chamber needs to be renovated, particularly to add the accessibility features so that democracy can prevail and the public can have equal access to this dais space. That's the purpose of that. The other purpose is the carpeting that your feet are on and we're looking at has been in this building since 2002 and has not been replaced. So it's pretty rough. I know it looks really good. You know why? Because we got really good maintenance people who vacuum it and look after it. But the reality is it's actually got some serious wear marks and damage.
Amy,
So-
you want some for your kids' room?
Nevertheless, Ms. Treasurer?
Thank you, Your Worship. The total budget amount for the council chamber renovation is 175,000. 140,000 of that is coming from grants. There is no actual taxation funding for that project.
There you go.
Okay, on to the small halls issue. Back again to from the Creamer Echo. Estimated 4.25 million to be borrowed through debenturing. What is the rate of interest on that going to be, and how long is the term?
We haven't taken out a loan for that, so I can't tell you what the interest rate is yet. That's the whole point of funding the current projects through the reserve so that we can hopefully take advantage of hopefully future lower interest rates.
Just one last thing, Community Culture and Tourism Coordinator Amanda Murray reported that the 2022 Small Halls Festival Series resulted in 19 events held between September 10th and November 4th and generated over $30,000 in online ticket sales. What is the breakdown of the individual tickets and what were losses or profits at the end of this festival season?
I don't think we've had a report on that yet. Have we, Terry? Terry, has that been prepared? No? No. I don't have that answer for
Okay.
you. You might recall I was away for the end of October and middle of November, so I missed the last couple of events.
Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Witzke, for joining us here tonight. Is there any other members of the public have anything further they'd like to add? Amy's back. Hello, Amy.
Hi. One last quick question. Is there any data tracking for how many people are using the bus currently and what stops aren't being utilized?
Good question. Dan, back to Dan, the transit expert.
Thank you, Your Worship. Certainly we track users. We don't have the technology. The bus doesn't have the technology to track individual stops.
Okay.
That would require more infrastructure on the bus to do that. But we can certainly track.
There's no way of just like even the bus driver like tallying how many people get on at what stop or anything like that.
That's not a requirement of their job. We do track it by fare. So however many people buy a monthly pass, being youth or adult pass, senior pass, and cash fare. So we know how much cash, we extrapolate how many people use that.
Is there any thought process on putting in something like an Uber type system instead of the busing route? Because we're on Sunnydale and the bus passes at least every hour and there's no one on it. If that there's one person on it. So is there any thought in switching the system that we have?
I'll answer that. That hasn't been directly discussed. There has been, if you don't mind me saying, conversations over the water, machine about that. But the system that we're operating today, we're working in the direction of creating a cooperative of transit systems, which would be much more efficient for all parties and provide a higher level of service. To your comment about Uber, I too also use social media. And I noted that someone posted some time ago that there is an Uber in Clearview now. And so I downloaded the app myself just to see, and it is here. And I can press this button right now and tell me that an Uber would be here in 10 minutes to take me from this location to Collingwood at a cost of $25.24. How about that?
But I'm just saying if there's any way of, cost savings with figuring out like stops that aren't being utilized or switching the bus route or something like that, we can cut down on fueling issues or things like that. That's just my thought process. That's all.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the comment for sure. And we are trying to provide the level of service that the community wants and needs. And the work that Dan does along with his cohorts at other municipalities is hopefully going to pay off in a better transit system. It is frustrating, that's for sure. And it's very frustrating that we spent an awful lot of effort as a council in the previous term discussing the Creemore route, spent all that money and had no pickup. And yet, to be quite honest and to be blunt, we had an awful lot of people sit at that microphone and say, we need this transit service in Creemore, and not one of them used it.
Yeah.
So it's frustrating, you try to help the public and ask them to give us their input, and then they don't use it when we offer it. So anyway, good point though. Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you.
Your Worship,
Yes.
if I can just add, the theme or the industry is moving toward, for our size of transit system, the industry is moving toward an on-demand transit. It takes a lot of work to get up and running. App development and things like that require that specialized knowledge. Collingwood is just now branching out into that, and I think they're just slowly trying to develop that in Collingwood as far as an on-demand system. Bigger city, bigger cities, bigger transit systems, they just run. But for a transit system this size, it's being tried. It's industry is leaning toward that. And we'll see how Collingwood makes it with theirs.
All right. Mr. Beelan, I saw his card. Did you want to speak though, Dave? Just come up.
The Uber thing quick. Why don't you look into how the township of Innisfil is doing it? They seem to.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I'm aware.
Subsidized, like you see.
Yeah. Mayor Dolan and I had a talk about that at the county meeting just a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, good point. Mr. Beelan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just Googled what Innisfil has done, and they said there were some good things and bad things. And it says right here that the city has now spent more on Uber than a traditional transit option it was considering. So they have found some problems with the user or Uber hubs and stuff that they were using. So I don't think it's something you want to delve into without really checking it out. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for that info. I'm going to look at the public. If the public consultation period, anything further? All right. Thank you very much for participating, guys. I really appreciate seeing you here tonight. Members of council, I'll just wrap this up before we go to the confirmatory bylaw and state that, as I've said to a few members of council, we have an opportunity, if you wish, to communicate with me as the mayor through the clerk and the CAO. If we wish to hold a special meeting of council to consider anything further on this budget, I would like to hear from you soon. And that way, it'll give an opportunity for the clerk to prepare said special meeting. I would call it if you convince me to call it. But in the meantime, we have the meeting on the 27th, which would, Madam Treasurer, you would give us a report that would outline everything we've discussed with it updated numbers as to where we would be. And council will have an opportunity to make any types of edits on the spot at that time. As long as you got your pencil sharp over there in the Treasury Department. And the clerk is penciling it down. So that would be an opportunity to make any type of changes. At the conclusion of that meeting, it would be my hope that there would be a motion to send the treasurer with the information to go prepare the final documents. That doesn't have to happen. As you know, we can do a deferral. We can do an amendments. We can do a lot of things, but that would be my hope for the, to move the municipality forward. Any questions on that commentary? Anybody? No. All right. I'm going to move to item 5, or close public consultation at this time then. Item 5 is the bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the council meeting. Recommendation be it resolved that bylaw 23-14 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the special council, or of the proceedings of the February 9, 2023 special council meeting be presented and read a first, second, and third time, finally passed on the 9th day of February 2023. I'll look this direction and we'll go with Mr. MacArthur and the deputy mayor. Mr. MacArthur, deputy mayor, any questions? Seeing none, I'll call the motion. All those in favor? And the bylaw carries unanimous. Thank you. We are at the motion to adjourn. It is, what is that? Let's call it 20 after. No, what time is it? 18? 18. 818, 818. The old number 8. It's always lucky, isn't it? Okay. Motion to adjourn. Be it resolved. Council meeting adjourned at 8:18 p.m. Deneen and Broderick. Thank you. All those in favor? Carries. We're going to adjourn. And like I said, if we have a special meeting, we will announce that as soon as possible.